You're walking through a forest, headphones in, $14 water bottle in hand, thinking about what to have for dinner. You are not running, you are not yelling, you are, by any reasonable measure, completely harmless. And yet, every animal within 100 meters is treating your arrival like a natural disaster. A rabbit freezes and then evaporates. A fox disappears mid-step as if it was never there. A crow on a branch above you goes very still and starts filing a detailed mental report. You are on vacation. You are the least threatening version of yourself that has ever existed, and the entire forest is acting like someone pulled the fire alarm. There is a reason for this. It is older than agriculture, older than fire, older than the first human tool, and once you understand it, you will never look at a fleeing deer the same way again. Here's what nobody tells you. The fear of humans and animals didn't start when we invented guns. Didn't start with agriculture, didn't even start with fire. It started when early humans became persistence hunters. We couldn't outrun prey, couldn't overpower it. What we could do was follow it. For hours, in midday heat. At a pace that can only be described as aggressively medium. From a wildebeest perspective, a human jogging steadily on the horizon wasn't just dangerous, it was a new category of dangerous. Every other predator ambushed or gave up or lost interest. The human just kept getting closer. At the same speed. Forever, if you were a gazelle watching this happen to your neighbor, you would have formed a very strong opinion about upright bipeds very quickly. And that opinion would have been, do not wait to find out what happens next. The animals that didn't run from human silhouettes got hunted. The ones that did run survived, reproduced, and passed that response to their offspring. Repeat that for 50,000 generations. What you get is fear encoded directly into DNA. Not a habit. Not a personality trait. A survival algorithm that evolution spent millions of years writing. You, standing there with your water bottle completely on vacation, are triggering every single line of that code. In 2016, researchers at the University of Western Ontario ran an experiment that produced one of the most uncomfortable findings in recent wildlife science. They hid speakers near water sources and wildlife trails, played recordings of wolves, bears, mountain lions, then played recordings of humans, just people talking, normal conversation. The kind you'd hear waiting for coffee. Animals fled from human voices at more than double the rate they fled from any actual predator. Mountain lions, apex predators, animals that eat deer for breakfast and have essentially no natural enemies, sprinted from the sound of two people casually chatting faster than they ran from the sound of a rival mountain lion. The researchers officially labeled humans the super predator. Not the strongest, not the fastest, the most feared thing on the planet. And the reason isn't claws or size. The reason is that we have absolutely no pattern. Wolves hunt at dawn and dusk. Crocodiles ambush near water. Hawks target open fields. Every predator has a schedule. And prey animals have spent millions of years learning those schedules because knowing the pattern is literally what keeps you alive. Humans hunt in the morning, at night, alone in groups of 40, with spears, nets, rifles, and in at least one documented case, a drone. We hunt animals we eat and animals we will never eat. There is no safe window. There is no place we don't go. From an animal's perspective, we are a threat variable that cannot be solved. And when you cannot solve a threat variable, the only rational response is maximum avoidance. Every single day. No days off. Want to see what animals look like without that fear installed? Go somewhere humans have never been. When Darwin arrived at the Galápagos Islands in 1835, he expected the animals to behave the way animals everywhere else behaved. They didn't. Marine iguanas sat beside him without moving. Giant tortoises didn't react to his approach. Blue-footed boobies stood directly in his path and watched him walk toward them with the energy of someone who has nowhere to be and no concerns whatsoever. He wrote in his journal that the indifference of the animals was almost puzzling. It wasn't puzzling, it was the absence of data. The fear algorithm had never been triggered. There was no information in their system that said upright biped equals danger. So the default response was simply, large object, not currently eating me, carry on. Antarctica runs the same experiment in real time. Penguins with no history of human contact walk straight toward researchers, inspect their equipment, and have been documented attempting to steal items that seem interesting. Not bravery, just a complete absence of a warning system that was never installed. The lesson from every one of these situations is the same. Fear of humans is not a default setting. It is installed through experience. Take away the experience and the fear dissolves, sometimes within just 2 or 3 generations. Which means every animal that runs from you today is not reacting to you. It is reacting to a memory it inherited, a memory it never chose to have. In 1995, wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone after 70 years of absence. Biologists expected the elk population to shrink. What actually happened was stranger. The elk changed where they went. They abandoned riverbanks, stopped grazing open valleys, not because wolves were everywhere, there weren't that many, but because the elk no longer knew where the wolves weren't. That uncertainty alone was enough to restructure everything. When elk stopped overgrazing riverbanks, vegetation recovered. Roots held soil in place, rivers stopped eroding, channels deepened and cooled. Trout came back. Songbirds returned because the shrubs regrew. Beaver populations expanded because the willows came back. Rivers in the park literally changed course because wolves made elk afraid to stand in certain places. The fear itself, not the actual predation, rebuilt an ecosystem. A study in Science in 2018 found that mammals across 6 continents had become significantly more nocturnal in response to human activity, not habitat destruction, not hunting, just humans being present during the day. Our schedule was enough to rewire the sleeping patterns of wildlife across an entire planet. We are not just a predator. We are an ecological pressure so consistent and so widespread that we have changed when animals decide it is safe to be awake. Fair question. If animals are so scared of us, why do some attack? Almost every dangerous animal encounter happens in one of 3 situations. The animal has no escape route. The animal is a mother with young nearby. Or the animal has been pushed so close to human development that the margin for avoidance has simply run out. In almost every case, it is not aggression. It is an animal that ran out of options. The one real exception is the polar bear. Polar bears are one of the few large predators that will actively hunt humans without provocation. But this makes sense when you know their history. They evolved in an environment with no other large predators, almost no prey variety, and zero exposure to bipedal creatures of any kind. They never received the data that every other large predator eventually accumulated. For a polar bear, a human on the ice is just a novel prey-sized object in an environment where food is scarce. It is not aggression. It is the complete absence of the warning system that thousands of years of contact with humans eventually installs in every other species. Let's talk about the animals that went past fear entirely and arrived somewhere more interesting. Crows don't just habituate to humans. They develop opinions about specific humans. Researchers at the University of Washington showed that crows can recognize individual faces, remember who has threatened them, and hold that information for years. One study had a researcher capture and ban crows while wearing a specific mask. The crows identified the mask as the threat. They began dive bombing anyone wearing that mask on campus. Then they taught other crows to do the same. Then they taught their offspring. For years, a specific rubber mask triggered a coordinated harassment campaign across an entire crow population, organized, inherited, and expanded across generations. So to summarize, some animals are so completely unafraid of us that they have moved past fear, past tolerance, past mild curiosity, and arrived at active multi-generational surveillance with recruitment, which is either a sign of remarkable intelligence or the beginning of something we should be paying considerably more attention to. The cleanest evidence for everything we've discussed comes from first contact, moments when humans encounter animals with zero prior exposure to people. The results are always the same, no fear. None. Early Pacific explorers described walking up to seabirds that had never seen humans and simply picking them up. The birds had no threat category for a large biped approaching slowly with hands. The dodo, famously extinct largely because of this, was described by early European visitors as so unbothered by human presence that hunting required almost no effort. They walked toward the hunters. Sailors thought they were stupid. They weren't stupid, they just had no template. No inherited memory of what humans do. And without that template, the default assumption was not a threat. Every first contact situation tells us the same thing. The fear isn't about what we look like, it isn't about how we move, it is entirely about what we have done, not to these animals personally, but to their ancestors across thousands of years of contact. You are not being assessed as an individual, you are being assessed as a category. And as a category, we have not historically given animals many reasons to update that assessment in our favor. Here's the part that should genuinely stay with you. Because of that fear, because animals flee, hide, go nocturnal, restructure their entire lives around avoiding us, we often don't see the full scale of what we're doing. You walk into a forest. It's quiet. It feels peaceful. And that silence reads as nature doing fine. But that silence is the sound of animals hiding. The landscape of fear makes ecological disruption invisible to the people causing it. The most affected wildlife populations are also the most invisible ones. But fear that is learned can be unlearned. Mountain gorilla tourism programs in Rwanda and Uganda have documented gorilla groups that went from fleeing rangers on site to tolerating, and in some cases approaching, human observers over just a few years of consistent, non-threatening contact. Not because the gorillas forgot the data, but because they got new data. Rewilded areas show animals gradually recovering natural activity patterns. Daytime movement returns. The hypervigilance relaxes. The landscape of fear is not permanent. It is a reflection of behavior. The rabbit that froze when it heard your footsteps is running a program written by thousands of generations of ancestors who learned, the hard way, what happens when you don't. It doesn't know you're harmless. It knows what the historical record says. The only way to change what animals know about us is to change what the record says. And that, it turns out, is entirely up to us.